My name is Leila Marshy. I'm with Baraka Books with Robin Philpott, and we published Zionism Decoded in 101 quotes. It is the first or second of our new series of books that we're calling Traction. Short books, urgent books, written quickly by people who know what they're talking about, books you can pick up, carry in your pocket, sort of the alternative to doom scrolling, in a way, book-wise, and stuff you can really learn and dig deep on. So we have 4 coming out between now and June, and we have more in the works. We're really proud of Traction. So we have Yakov's book up here. I'd like to do a small land acknowledgement. We're on the Kanasutake land. Land acknowledgements have become rote, and one thing I've noticed since, well, always been in the Palestinian movement, but you know, what happened to the Anishinaabe and Mohawk and the people of our land is the same thing that's happening to Palestinians and many people around the world. And I think the more we make these connections, the more we will be part of the resistance against them. I'd like to thank Kevin Gould and Norma Rantisi of the Department of Geography. Kevin is here, and Amy, graduate student, Maya, same letters, who really helped me organize this, and who also brought in 3 groups, academics and staff for Palestine at Concordia, Jewish Faculty Network of Montreal, and I think some members of these groups are here, and the Palestine Interdisciplinary Working Group of Concordia. So it takes a village, and we're a village here, and I really appreciate that. I'm just kind of introduce Yakov Rabkin. Has been a professor of history at the Université de Montreal since 1973. He has held visiting positions at universities in Australia, France, Israel, Japan, Russia, South Africa, and the Ukraine, and the US. His areas of expertise are contemporary Jewish history, international relations, and science and technology policies. He has authored hundreds of articles and several books, including Science Between Superpowers, A Threat from Within, A Century of Jewish Opposition to Zionism. What is Zionism? What is modern Israel? And Demodernization, A Future in the Past, and Judaism, Islam et Modernité. The current book that we have is also available in French and Russian. We have the French version up at the front. We might have sold out. That's possible. But the English version is here. Mr. Rabkin is frequently invited to comment on current events in electronic and print media. He has done consulting work for OECD, NATO, UNESCO, and the World Bank, and he is a founding member of Independent Jewish Voices. To his left is Denis Kosseim. He has taught philosophy for more than 30 years at the Cégep André Laurando. Born in Montreal to parents of Palestinian origin, he is co-author of Palestine, Le Fardeau de l'Espoir. He teaches the course Israel-Palestine at the Université de Sherbrooke, and is a member and spokesperson of Palestinians and Jews Unite, PAJU. I didn't introduce myself, sorry. I'm Leila Marshy. I wrote The Philistine, a novel, a collection of stories, My Thievery of the People, and an anthology that came out last year, and in which Kevin can be found, and anybody else in this room. It's called Raising Palestine, Punishing Dissent and Solidarity in Canada. It's up here as well. So let us welcome our guests.
So good evening. When I was asked to be the discussant with Yakov, I immediately said yes, because this is the highlight certainly of my year, and I'll tell you by 2030 of my decade. Okay? Welcome, Professor Rabkin. If I may add, ahla wa sahla ya ustaz. And of course, welcome to all for coming out on this sort of spring evening. So tonight we'll be discussing Professor Rabkin's book, Zionism Decoded in 101 Quotes. Sorry, I have technical problems. And historian Ilan Pape calls Zionism Decoded the most concise and incisive challenge that Zionist propaganda and Israeli Hezbollah will ever face. Ronnie Casserols, a comrade of Nelson Mandela and a minister in the Mandela government, calls the book dynamite. Casserols writes...
And he's a former underground fighter. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Exactly. Casserole writes in the book's foreword, if you could just give me a second. Here it is. No. Where? Hold on. I should have underlined it. Where did he write? Dynamite. Hold on. Father... I'm sorry, I should have been better prepared. I'll probably find it in a minute. And, oh yes, he calls it's the slingshot reference. He says that Yakov's book is like a slingshot to Zionism. I just can't find it right now. And my interpretation of the slingshot analogy is that Professor Rabkin is a courageous David, adroitly striking down a Zionist Goliath. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this. I don't know. Jeffrey Sachs, economist Jeffrey Sachs, has recently interviewed Professor Rabkin. And in the very beginning of the interview, he tells Professor Rabkin, almost blushingly, "I've been a long-time admirer and reader of yours. If you ask me, that sounds like a bromance." So a word about tonight's program. I'll be asking Professor Rabkin a few questions to kickstart the evening, and in about 40 minutes, we'll be opening with a Q&A. I simply ask that you keep your question or comment, keep it down to a concise question or comment, no speeches, please. Let's do this.
Et si jamais vous avez des questions en français, bienvenue.
Tout à fait. My first question. Zionism is the first word in the title of your book. So what precisely is Zionism? Perhaps a sub-question to the question. So Israel is a Jewish state. However, Judaism or the Jewish tradition is a confession, it's a religion, it's an ethics. How did Judaism go from being a spiritual sort of nation to becoming a political nation, and ultimately to becoming a nation state built on ethnic nationalism?
Well, it requires a long answer, but in very briefly, we are talking about a movement that did not emerge from Judaism. Therefore, the real question is that the religious root of Zionism is Protestant. From the 16th century on, there have been circulating ideas that it's important to gather Jews in the Holy Land as a prerequisite for the second coming of Christ. And the Israeli author Gershon Gorenberg referred to that project. It's a plain 5 acts, and we disappear in the 4th one. Why? Because according to that script, when Christ returns, Jews will have a choice: either recognize him as the Messiah, and therefore they'll stop being Jews, or perish. That's why disappearing in the 4th act. So that movement continued in the 19th century, particularly in Britain, and it was largely an English-speaking idea, so to speak. So in 19th century, very important geopolitical interest combined with a religious one. What were the geopolitical interests? Britain had interests in West Asia to ensure safe passage to India, and that's why a first Christian Zionist church opened in Jerusalem in 1838. And when the Suez Canal was inaugurated in 1869, if I remember, Britain had even more compelling reasons to support this idea. The only problem was the Jews were not interested. It was all fine, but it was discussion. It's a little bit like peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, except Russia doesn't participate. So it was, they gathered in Switzerland and they met together, but the other side wasn't there. So here it was the same thing, that they were very enthusiastic about the idea, and when I think it was Lord Shaftesbury who approached the chief rabbi of London and said, well, we want to help you get to the Holy Land. He answered that we want to live here, contributing to the country, and when Messiah comes, he'll take us to the Holy Land. So that was a standard sort of Jewish attitude towards the idea. How did how some Jews accepted this idea? Well, you have to look at Eastern Europe, at the blossoming of ethnic nationalism, particularly among nations that didn't have a state, like Hungarians being part of Austro-Hungarian Empire, Poles being divided among three empires, the Russian, Austrian, and German, Estonian, Latvians, and so on. So in Eastern Europe, there was a very strong ethnic nationalist fervor.
Yeah.
Jews in the Russian Empire, unlike Jews in the rest of Europe, had not been emancipated, which means that they had to live, or most of them had to live, in the Pale of Settlement, which corresponds to today's area of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Poland, Ukraine, Moldova. So that's pretty much the Pale of Settlement, and most Jews had to live there. Now, they had not been emancipated, but they had been affected by the secularization of Europe. So quite a few young Jews became socialists, became atheists, and unlike their counterparts in France, who could move from their little town to Paris, change the name, marry the Catholic, and disappear in the horizon, these people had to be constrained in where they lived. So they had to find an identity for themselves, because traditional Jewish identity for Jews who don't observe Torah are not positive. You can imagine, transgressors, evildoers, and so on. So they came up with an idea which was really novelty: secular Jew. Some people find it a bit as an oxymoron, but secular Jew means a Jew, someone of Jewish descent, but who doesn't observe the commandments, and doesn't feel bound by the commandments. And there was enough of people to identify themselves as a secular nation, just like the Poles and Lithuanians and so on. And that's why the Zionist idea, the idea of creating a state of their own, be it in Uganda, Argentina, or Palestine, attracted them, or attracted some of them. We shouldn't exaggerate. Only 1% of Jews from the Russian Empire who emigrated from the empire at the turn of the 20th century, only 1% of the 2 million practically landed in Palestine. And half of them left afterwards because conditions were difficult. But they became the core of the future Zionist settlement and the future Israeli government and the future elite. even till today, all the prime ministers of Israel, with the exception of Naftali Bennett, were either born in the Russian Empire or born of parents from the Russian Empire. And Naftali Bennett, I just didn't research it. It may be the case as well, but I'm not sure. So to answer you, in order for Jews to embrace Zionism, they had to transform themselves and embark on a very radical transformation project, which was common at the turn of the 20th century. It was a real revolution. They wanted to build a new society, to build a new man, and quite a few others wanted to do the same. You could think of the early 20th century when the Soviet Union emerged. They wanted also to build a new society, a qualitatively different society, and a new Soviet man. Needless to say, in Nazi Germany, there was an attempt to build a new Nordic type. So this idea was not unusual, but it is rooted in ethnic nationalism. And that explains fascist tendencies, because practically all ethnic nationalism sooner or later develops this kind of tendencies. Well, it's a long answer to your question.
Thank you. My second question, again, refers to the title of the book. So, Zionism Decoded. A code usually conveys secrecy, something hidden. To decode, therefore, means to break down something that is covert, obfuscated, and to convert it, to change it into something intelligible and understandable. So what exactly is the starting point and the end point of this conversion, or of the shift your book operates?
Conversion of what?
So the code, Zionism is coded.
Well, that's Robin.
That's the.
It's not me. It's his idea. In the original, it's Le Sionisme sans une citation. He wanted to put it decoded, so I agreed.
Okay.
Now, but why did I agree? Let's put it this way.
Okay.
I agreed because a lot of people are confused about Zionism. It's not that it's secret, it's not like coded, it's not coded at all. But it has many layers of obfuscation above it. So that's what the purpose is. For example, Joe Biden said, I'm a Zionist. And of course, there are millions of Christian Zionists in the United States, some of them in the west of Canada. I switched off my phone and suggest you do the same. So where was I? Because I'm easily
layers
distracted.
of obfuscation.
Yeah, right.
Biden.
And that's why Biden identifies as a Zionist, many Christian Zionists, and at the same time, you go to Outremont and you call someone Zionist, he will be offended. One of those Orthodox Jews would be offended, many of them. Not all of them, but many of them. And the same thing would happen not only in Outremont and Brooklyn, but in the very center of Jerusalem. So a lot of people are confused. What is Zionism if Joe Biden and all these Baptist pastors like Ambassador Huckabee are fervent Zionists, and these Jews, the most Jewish Jews, are not. So this is why I think that this little book gives you quotes both from Zionists, because it's not a denunciation. It's not. I give the floor to Moshe Dayan and Ben Gurion and other founders of the State of Israel, because otherwise it would be very biased. So I try to give. Jabotinsky takes a lot of place there. So it's not that I found denunciations of Zionism, but I'd rather wanted to give well, not a complete, but at least a multi-dimensional picture of it. So that's why Robin suggested Decoded, and I agreed, because indeed for many people it's confusion, it's unclear. I hope it's going to be clearer after having read my book.
Okay, thank you for that. My third question is about the book's timing. In the U.S., there seems to be growing disaffection with Israel among many Christian nationalists. A notable example is Tucker Carlson. Also, it is my understanding that before his death, Charlie Kirk, a rising star among this Christian nationalist group, was questioning the knee-jerk support for Israel in his group, if you will. It seems that in the U.S., many Christian nationalists have come to understand that U.S. interests and Israeli interests are not one and the same. There's a growing split between the Tucker Carlsons of the world and the Mike Huckabees that you just mentioned, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, who recently said, I don't know if everybody knows, that Israel can have all of the Middle East. So Huckabee is he's a leading voice within the Israeli lobby. Is your book a timely handbook for people like Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
That's a long answer.
Yes, what can I say?
Would you care to elaborate?
Well, the book appeared in French. It was now the idea, I like to shift the guilt to either to the English language publisher or to the French one. It was his idea in France to write a book, so I should write a book like that, because he has a series of Islam in 101 quotes and other things. So he asked me to write about Zionism. And I did, and it came out, if I'm not mistaken, almost a year ago, maybe a few months ago. So it wasn't timed for the two wars against Iran, but of course it has become timelier than I thought. Moreover, some of the tendencies that I outlined there, notably the fascist tendencies, because I quote quite a few Israeli politicians who proudly say they're fascist. Fine. Not Nazis, but fascists. Yeah. Now, and today, in today's world, I think it has changed for the last year, thanks to the new president of the United States. It's in your face. Everything is open. Netanyahu recently said that Jesus Christ had less influence than Genghis Khan. Evil conquers. Wonderful. You don't have to decode. It's all there. So today, this book is very timely. Particularly, you're right, for those Christians and Jews who are confused, who don't quite understand what's going on. On the one hand, they want to be loyal to their community. On the other hand, they can't stomach what Israel is doing, or the United States. So for these people, hopefully, it's a short book. Anyone can figure out what is written in it. No, it's not. I wouldn't say that about every book. And that's why I think it is important that it be known. And as you mentioned, Jeffrey Sachs is, I didn't know, but he's a fan of my books because he read several and did two podcasts that are widely watched. So apparently it's getting around. What Robin told me, there were 200 books just ordered to the United States. But of course the United States is the main market for this.
Very good. My fourth question Of all the quotes in the book, if you had to choose one quote in the book, the one that best operates what I call the decoding of Zionism, which one would that be? In his foreword, just before I hand you the book, in his foreword, Ronnie Casserol's quotes, and this time I will find it. I found the David and Goliath reference. So he says, here's the quote, the agricultural community that the Arabs found in Eretz Israel in the 7th century was none other than the Hebrew farmers that remained on their land despite all the persecution and oppression of the Roman and Byzantine emperors. There is no doubt that much Jewish blood flows in their veins. This is a quote
From David Ben-Gurion.
from Ben-Gurion. Ronnie Casserol's quotes Ben-Gurion. So that's the quote he chose. Which quote, if there was one quote that really hits the nail on the head?
Well, I would choose Jabotinsky, who was a Russian Jew from Odessa, a very talented writer in Russian. Actually, Russian writers were very sad that he went into Judaism, into Zionism. He knew nothing about Judaism, nothing whatsoever. And he embraced Zionism, and when he was embracing Zionism in 1910, there's a quote that I'm looking for. Well, it's easier to do it in a computer than here, but if you ask me to find, well, just wait.
In the meantime, I have a car for sale if anybody's interested.
A used one. Yeah. Well, I can't really find it very well. 42, let's see, maybe. No, there's another one when he's comparing with, say, people who suffered from oppression would not oppress others.
Oh, yeah.
That
If you find it, tell us the page.
Sorry?
If you find it, tell us the page.
Well,
Certainly.
perhaps we can have Robin look it up, and we'll get back to that question. How's
And
that?
you'll see that that quote is extremely timely, because it explains what's going on, just in 1910. And I would say that in every office of today's government, they would have a picture of Jabotinsky on the wall, because he is the founder of the movement that eventually became what is today Likud.
Perhaps Robin can find it, but
So I'll write it.
what was the gist of the quote?
Well, the gist of the quote is, well, I'll paraphrase it because I don't want to waste your time. He said that some people believe that because a group suffered from oppression, that when they become free, they will show compassion and mercy to others and therefore will not oppress them. This is, well, in English it's translated as childish humanism. We don't embrace it. In original Russian, it's not even childish, it's saliva-dripping humanism. That's the reason, that the direct translation. But in English, it's childish. Sorry?
Infantile.
Well, more than infantile, it's even more. Yeah. So, and I think this is very important to understand, particularly for those who think, well, oh, this horrible Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, what they're doing, the Zionism, Israel was such a nice place, and Zionism was never a nice thing.
Page 30.
30. Page 30.
Okay, now that I have paraphrased, I can do it.
We'll see how good you were at paraphrasing.
Sometimes we base too many rosy hopes on the fallacy that a certain people has itself suffered and will therefore feel the agony of another people and understand it, and it, in its conscience will not allow it to inflict on the weaker people what had been early inflicted on it. But in reality, it appears that these are mere pretty phrases. Only the Bible, again, in the original, it's written only the Old Testament. Now, for a Jew to refer to Torah as Old Testament is highly, but again, he was so far from Judaism that it was normal. Only the Bible says, "You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the heart of the stranger, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt." Contemporary morality has no place for such childish humanism. Just the word morality reminds me another politician who is alive, who said that he doesn't care about international law, his own morality will guide him. The one sitting south of the border. That's.
Thank you. So my fifth question, again refers to the book's foreword.
We're in the preparation for Passover, and the Passover there are 4 questions usually, but well, there are 5.
I am foreign to this tradition. My fifth question, again refers to the foreword in the book, the quote by Desmond Tutu. So my question, and he says that it's worse than apartheid. Israel is worse than apartheid. The quote is, "In many instances, Israeli apartheid is worse than South Africa under white minority rule." That's a direct quote by of Desmond Tutu. So, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Desmond Tutu. So my question is, I'll ask my question and then I'll explain it, okay? My question is apartheid in Zionism's DNA? Is it inherently supremacist? I ask this because had there been no one in Palestine, had it been a land without a people for a people without a land, would Zionism be particularly supremacist? So it's a what-if question. What if Palestine had been a land without a people for a people without a land? Would Israel then be a normal country?
Well, we have a control experiment. In 1928, the Soviet government decided to organize a Jewish autonomous republic in the Soviet Union, Birobidzhan. I happened to visit it returning from one of my trips to Japan. It's in Far East on the Chinese border, and indeed, it was founded in a place where there was no other population. So there is a possibility. I don't think that Zionism as an ethnic nationalist movement was necessarily opposed to anyone. But once they settled, when they began the settlement, they realized that there were people there. And for some reason, these people didn't like the idea of being displaced. So I think it became aggressively xenophobic as a result of that situation. However, Zionism was also overtly a colonial movement. Overtly. I mean, it's not, again, I'm not denouncing anything. What today is Bank Leumi, the main bank in Israel, its maiden name is Jewish Colonial Trust. So it was very clear that they saw themselves, I mean Herzl and his friends who started the political Zionism, they saw themselves as very similar to what was happening in Africa, that they're bringing civilization, they are, so to speak, white people. And for them, there was no doubt, for most of them. Of course, I think I'm quoting someone, a Russian Jewish intellectual who went there in 1891, and he already saw the oppression. And he said, just watch it. It's going to be dangerous. So I don't think that it's necessarily an aggressively xenophobic movement, but in the context of a country that is already populated, of course, so they could have settled there without aspiring for a state, a nation state, and so on. The history would have been very different, including, as many Jews, Palestinian Jews, said at that time, in the 1930s, Palestine would have received a lot more European Jews because there wouldn't be tension. So you asked me about iffy history. Well, here's iffy history for you. Because of the tension in the 1930s, the Arab Revolt and all that, the Brits wouldn't allow more Jews to immigrate to Palestine because they didn't want to complicate matters even further. Had there been normal relations between local population and the settlers, had the settlers agreed to participate in the representative assembly that the British authorities wanted to convene in the 30s, so that prepare Palestine for independence eventually. But the Zionists were dead opposed to the idea of a representative assembly because they were a tiny minority. So this is a possible history. Unfortunately, it unfolded very differently both in Europe and in Palestine.
Thank you. I just wanted to note a word I learned. I believe it's a Hebrew word. I recognize the root of the word Cush, the Cush Empire. Kushim is the N word in Hebrew, correct?
Not quite, because
If I recall.
no, Kushim is, well, Kush is the Hebrew word for Ethiopia,
Yeah.
and therefore black people are called Kushim.
Yeah.
That's all. But it doesn't have this negative connotation.
Okay, that was the impression I had, because the inhabitants of Palestine were, I can't remember who.
Yeah, but I think in the discussion, well, it's the British that responded this way, I think, to Weizmann, if I remember correctly. But it doesn't matter. Say, well, the whole idea was that in the 20s, in the 30s, the British authorities who supported Zionism couldn't care less about, I think Balfour wrote, about a few thousand Arabs who happened to inhabit the land now. So for them, they're strangers, they're foreigners. And I think for most Israelis, Palestinians are foreigners. They're causing problems in our country. They're foreigners, essentially. And they have 23 other countries. Why don't they go there? So that's the whole idea of considering local population as irrelevant.
Okay. Thank you. My following question, I believe it's the sixth question. I don't know.
No, go ahead. No.
So I read the book some time ago when I got the copy. It's so short in one seating. I reread it today. And I reread it using the categories in the table of contents. So origins, precursors, warnings, ideologues, builders, warriors, victims, politicians, supporters, critics. And I found in my second reading the, what's the word in English? Découpage. The structure. I found it so clear and pedagogical. That wasn't meant as a compliment, but you can take it as a compliment.
Okay, I won't.
So how did you structure the book? Could you explain how you came about with this structure? Why not another structure?
Well, this was my idea, so I cannot point my finger at someone else. Well, I wanted to present a multidimensional picture of Zionism, and therefore I had to go and show where it came from, who supported, who criticized, who warned that is not a good idea, that something bad is going to happen. What do today's politicians say about it? What do the warriors, the people who actually conducted several wars, and Moshe Dayan is in that sense very important. He's a hero, an icon of Israel, and his quotes have a lot of weight, and that's why I included it. Actually, the structure helps the reader a lot. I must say that there is another short book that just came out, Israel and Palestine. I didn't ask Robin to sell that book because that's direct competition. But you could look at the copy, it's right there. That book is not structured this way, that's why I'm mentioning. Because here I'm going a different way. For the 101 quotes, I think it is very important, if someone is interested just in supporters, okay, you open the page and you read. You're interested in warriors, depends on what you're interested in. Indeed, the book is very short, it's very easy to read. So the fact that it's pedagogical may reflect my déformation professionnelle.
Okay. Another question about the word Zionism. Again, it's in the title. Finkelstein, I'm sure many know Norman Finkelstein here. He says, I don't use the word Zionism. He did his doctoral dissertation on Zionism. He says personally he doesn't use the word Zionism. Nobody knows what it means. I think he says it could be a shampoo brand or something like that. So your thoughts on his assessment?
Well, I don't know this assessment, so I haven't read it, so I only hear it now.
He just refuses to use a word that doesn't have a clear definition for most people. Supremacy, Jewish supremacy, white supremacy, these words, have meaning for people. Zionism, you need a course, you need understanding, you need a book, you need a short book, granted. So that's why he stays away from the word.
It's his choice. Norman has categorical views, as we know. And I do use Zionism precisely because otherwise you have to use Zionist terminology. The Jewish state, Jewish supremacy, Jewish settlements. You see, there is no way out, because if you say white supremacy, it's a very general term, it's a generic drug. You have to be precise, and I think that's why Zionism is an ideology, official ideology of the state. True, for many people it's fuzzy. Even the official Israeli denomination, Jewish state, no one can define what it is. And I've attended several seminars in Israel on the issue of Jewish state. What is a Jewish state? Is it a state where a majority are Jews, a state that follows Jewish law, a state that follows Jewish morality? It's unclear. It's like, what is a Jewish table? A table made by Jews, sold by Jews, bought by a Jew, has kosher food on it. We don't know. So it's extremely fuzzy definition, in the name of which a lot of blood has been shed.
You say Zionism is the official ideology. So if it's an official ideology, I would think, therefore, that there's an official definition. So there's no official definition of Zionism.
Well, again,
in Israel, I'm talking in the political entity of Israel.
Well, it's the yearning of the Jewish yearning to have a homeland. That's the closest that I can come to it. Because the state of Israel represents itself as the state of Jews around the world. You see, Israel is one of the very few states which doesn't have borders. Well, today you know what it means not to have borders. You can occupy parts of Lebanon, bomb Iran, interfere in elections in the United States. It doesn't matter.
Syria?
Yeah, Syria, all that. But there's more of that meaning of borderless, because this book, What's Modern Israel, in Italian it came under a different title. Actually, my books always change titles. So if you look up, you think I wrote so many books. No, it's often the same book in different titles. So they call it Lo Stato Senza Confini, a state without borders. And the state without borders because it says we are a state of all the Jews in the world who agree and adore Israel, those who are indifferent, those who denounce it. So it's a very unusual state in that sense. That's why Zionism and the concept of Jewish state as used in Israel are different things. And I think it's, for example, I use the word Zionist very often. I say Zionist settlements or Zionist state. Because when you say Jewish state, you help Israeli propaganda.
Thank you. I'm taking notes. I'll say it's my last question. Never say never, but I'll say it's my last question. And it's a very nosy question. I'm warning you, Yakov. It's a very nosy question. What's the next book on?
I don't have any plans. Honestly, I don't. I started writing memoirs a while ago. I may put it together. But the first edition, if it ever comes out, will be in Russian because I'm writing it in Russian, which is my native language. So that's maybe the next one. But if a publisher asks me to write something again along these lines, I may do it.
Well, that would be very interesting. Yakov Rabkin's memoirs. Yes, don't be humble. Your intellectual genealogy, the evolution of your thinking. That would be. I would be very interested in learning about that.
Agreed.
So thank you very much for Professor Rabkin for answering my questions. I'd like at this time to open it up. So we're going to have a Q&A. We have a question. Emmanuel.
Just to follow up on the comment you made about Norman Finkelstein wanting to no longer use the word Zionism. There was a film that came out, I guess, about 2 years ago or less, which is called Israelism.
Yes.
And the film makes the argument that we shouldn't use Zionism anymore as a term because it's kind of an opaque term. And when you say Israelism, everyone gets what you're talking about, the cult of Israel, so to speak. Just a comment.
Yeah, that's a good term, particularly today. I think that's a term many American servicemen would use.
Interesting.
Question?
Please.
You mentioned that Israel was never a nice place. The synagogues have always been teaching, and they continue to, that Israel is a wonderful place, land of milk and honey. Were they ignorant or are they lying?
Well, I think that we have to distinguish between the biblical land flowing with milk and honey, which is a quote from the Pentateuch, and the political structure of Israel and the Zionist settlement there from the end of the 19th century. These are two very different things. And they are still very different in the minds of many people. Again, I will refer to Jews in Outremont. Many of them have family in Israel. Many of them have friends, they travel there very often. But if you ask them, where are you going? If you ask me if I buy a ticket to Israel, I say, I'm going to Israel. They won't. They say, we're going to Eretz Yisrael. Now, why Eretz Yisrael? That's a Yiddish inflected expression, land of Israel. Land of Israel emphasizes it's not the state of Israel. And, I used the opportunity to answer a question that was often asked in public lectures that I gave. If these anti-Zionists in Jerusalem hate the state so much, why do they live there? It was about 20 years ago, I went to see Rabbi Hirsch, who is no longer in this world, and I asked him, well, people ask me, why do you stay here? Because they live in Jerusalem, old Jerusalem. And he said, look, we were here under the Ottomans. We were here under the British, and we'll remain here after the Zionists. So for them, the land of Israel is something very different from the state.
Thank you. Yes.
You mentioned that the Jewish inhabitants...
Could you stand up? It will be easier to hear you.
Yes, you mentioned that the Jewish inhabitants of Montreal would object to being called Zionists. I wonder if you could hear more about that. Is that an objection just to the word, or a difference in beliefs, or something else?
Both. Well, again, by and large, Outremont, Jewish Outremont, is populated by very religious Jews. Of course, there are all kinds of people there, but by and large. And they're easily identifiable by their attire, because they usually wear black and white, and you can easily identify them. And in fact, these Jews often pay the price for what Israel does, because they are the most identifiable Jews. That's another issue. So most of them, as their teachers and leaders, the rebbes, rejected Zionism. They rejected it for religious reasons, as the same one that I mentioned in the beginning, that we are waiting for Messiah, and when he comes, we'll go. And many of them, particularly, say, Satmar Hasidic dynasty, which is well represented in Outremont and is the largest Hasidic group in the world. Not the most visible, but the largest. They follow the teachings of Rabbi Tettelbaum, who passed away a few decades ago, and who wrote fundamental anti-Zionist books, which base anti-Zionism not on political considerations, but on purely Judaic sources. And this is part of the Jewish religious anti-Zionism. And I must add that my interest in the subject and the book that was mentioned, I think it would be somewhere here, A Threat from Within, the Jewish opposition to Zionism, it began in Jerusalem when I was there on sabbatical. And I went to a study group. I didn't know much about it, study group. Jewish anti-Zionist thought. And they were all religious Jews, not the ultra-Orthodox like in Outremont. Many of them were what I would say followers of national Judaism, Dati Leumi, who combined modern world with commitment to Zionism and commitment to Jewish rituals. And many of them honestly wanted to understand how could Jews oppose Zionism, because they grew up in the atmosphere of national Judaism, where it was taught to them that it's a biblical commandment, we are doing a big good work when we occupy this hill or that hill. And so for them, it was self-evident that all Jewish history leads to Zionism and the State of Israel. That's how they were taught. And then when they grew up, they realized that that's not the most important rabbis of the 20th century were against. So they wanted to study those sources, and I joined them to study those sources. And that's how the history of that book. I never planned to write that book, but I just had materials, and I brought them with me to Montreal. And then, I think in 2000, there was a demonstration of Orthodox Jews from New York. I think they came against Zionism or against Israel. And La Presse asked me to write an article about it, and I wrote it explaining, because for them it was like boiling snow. What is this? It's oxymoron. It can't happen. So I explained why it happens. And then I wrote another article, and then, well, I'm telling you the story, the director of Presse Université Laval came over and says, could you write a book about anything? We want to have a book of yours. And after a while, I thought, well, I have this material, I may as well write this book. That's the story of that book that I never planned to write. So to answer your question, it's religious opposition, it's not political opposition.
Thank you. Yes, une question peut-être en français. Allez-y.
Ma question est assez élémentaire. Donc, on a discuté de la confusion, disons, autour du terme sionisme. Puis, on a même mentionné que certaines personnes refusent de l'utiliser. Donc, ma question est la suivante. Est-ce qu'on peut identifier des points communs, un socle commun tout de même, dans les grandes tendances de définition? Et est-ce qu'on peut aussi identifier des points profonds de désaccord? Donc, voilà.
Entre qui?
Les différentes définitions
de sionisme.
Oui, c'est ça.
Are there people who don't understand French here? Oh, there is one. He organized it. I can't do it. Okay, I'll answer in English. So the question was, what are the main points of disagreements about the definition of Zionism? Well, honestly, don't have much.
So if there's common ground, like there must be some common ground in the definitions at some point, it seems.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how to answer this question because I never looked into it. Yeah. That's the first time I heard about Norman Finkelstein not using it, so I really haven't given much thought to it. Sorry.
No.
Please. Oui. Oui. Fred après.
En français.
Mais je vous en prie.
Para en français, en español, si sería mejor.
No, se puede en español también.
Español también.
Sí, no hay problema.
Quería saber que en Argentina y en Chile, en la Patagonia chilena, están llegando todos los sionistas que están asesinando en Palestina ocupada. Me gustaría saber cuál es su pensé porque se están expandiendo. Mekorot, la empresa de lo que privé llegó a los israelitas, a los palestinos. Hoy día están instalándose en toda la Argentina, en la Patagonia chilena y Argentina. Me gustaría saber cuál es su opinión con respecto a eso.
Well, the question.
Hay un peligro grande porque la gente que ha cometido genocidio está llegando ahora a la América del Sur y está por el extremo sur y por el canal de Panamá. Entonces me gustaría saber cuál es su respuesta ante eso, porque creo que no nos han alertado de la gravedad que está pasando, porque sionistas están en toda la América Latina.
Well, the question is about Latin America, particularly Patagonia, where there are apparently Israelis who arrive and who wants to settle there, and who people who committed genocide, and therefore they're bringing their experience to Latin America. Well, I would say that Argentina doesn't need foreign experience in terms of genocide. I think its own history is pretty rich. So I wouldn't be surprised. I know nothing about this phenomenon, honestly. But I wouldn't be surprised because some Israelis don't want to live in Israel. That's quite understandable. And Patagonia is maybe a good place, moderate climate, and so on. Yeah, I don't know this phenomenon. I can't tell you.
De la más grande reserva de agua dulce.
Ah,
Y Ecuador está controlando más de 10 provincias en Argentina y también en Chile. Y esto viene de dictadura en Chile.
well, that here we have an explanation that it has the largest reservoir of drinking water in between Argentina and Chile in Patagonia. And that may be of great interest, of course, to Israel. But I would add that Israel has become an indispensable nation. And indispensable even for the states who are ostensibly anti-Zionist, including South Africa. They use Israeli surveillance technologies. They use Israeli weapons. So they use Israeli know-how of population control. In many countries of the world, there are Israeli advisors, and in the high-tech sector in the United States largely, also there are many Israelis who occupy important positions, and of course many Zionists, American Zionists. So Israel is indeed a state without borders in the sense also that it exports its experience of oppressing Palestinians, which indeed enables them to sharpen the weapons and to make them battle-tested, as they say. Even though many countries may disagree with Israel's behavior and ideology, many continue to buy its weapons and so on. So that's my answer.
Eso es más una acotación. El presidente de la Argentina ha dicho que es el presidente más sionista de los sionistas.
Sí.
Es una creación en la América Latina.
Well, the question is about President Milei, who says that he's more Zionist than the Zionist. Well, I think that Mike Huckabee is a more Zionist than many Jewish Zionists. That's a very normal phenomenon, and it's very normal because for Christian Zionists, which I think Milei is one, the issue of Israel and Zionism is largely spiritual. No, it has political overtones, but it's largely spiritual. So they don't have families living there. They don't have relatives. For them, it's a very abstract term. It's a place where Jesus should come, and then will be Armageddon and Gog and Magog, and the whole script is ready. For Jewish Zionists, it's a bit different because many have friends, many have family, and there are facts that they have to deal with. Whereas for Christian Zionists like Milei, he doesn't have to deal with facts.
Fred, you
That's
have,
good for him.
Okay, let's move to
Fred,
others.
you had a question?
A different question. And this is about the Ethiopian Jews who went to Israel. And I wondered if you could speak briefly, if you're aware, what the reaction of the Israelis to these Ethiopian Jews. I'm sure there were different reactions, from different people saw it differently, but what, in terms of Zionism, how were these immigrants who were black, but who identified as Jews, and so that's my question.
Well, again, I can share what I know, which is not very much, but Ethiopian citizens, quite a few of them claimed Jewish origins, in fact, very ancient Jewish origins. And during the civil war there, and several civil wars in the area, Israel brought organized an airlift to bring many of them to Israel. Now, the question is how well they were received.
Or not so how well, but how were they received and what were the different
Okay. Yeah.
positions that came out and perhaps what was the resolution, if there was one?
Well, I think that the majority of them settled there, and they were received, I think, by, well, again, I don't have sociological data, but my impression is that the majority of Israelis are very happy that here is an ancient tribe of Jews coming to settle in Israel. Religious authorities in Israel had a problem because they didn't consider them Jews. So many of them had to undergo formal conversion to Judaism, which offended quite a few people. Because you come because you're a Jew and then you have to be converted to Judaism. Also, of course, like in any society, there's racial prejudice. Israel is certainly not immune to it, so there is such a fact. Also, you observe, but you observe it in many countries, that many Ethiopian Jews occupy lower positions on the socioeconomic ladder. So you see many cleaners, many people with less paid occupations that you identify Ethiopians there, you can see it. But there are some officers in the Israeli army who are Ethiopian. I don't know, again, I don't have sociological data, whether they intermarry with the rest of the Israelis. I just don't know. That would be an interesting question. But by and large, they are settled. There have been problems. There have been protest movements. Everything has been there. There were also a scandal when the blood donated by Ethiopian citizens of Israel was not used by the authorities and was just thrown away. That was a big scandal in Israel about it. So that's my incomplete answer to your question.
Yes, Kevin.
Thank you for all the insights so far. I wanted to ask a question. I feel like, especially among many people that were not aware of the apartheid and the racism and the oppression against Palestinians in Israel-Palestine, and became aware of it with the genocide in Gaza. And I think that might lead to a perception that Israel was kind of okay, or at least not so bad in its origins, and became bad. And I know that's very vague, like bad, but I was just wondering if you could comment on that. Like, to what extent are we seeing continuities that go to the origins of Zionism, and to what extent are we looking at sort of a problematic government or something like that?
What government? What?
To what extent is it the government, or to what extent is it the society as a whole? Please.
You couldn't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but
I'll get closer. Also, maybe like unclear. I think many people.
No, I understood the
You
question.
understood the question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now, why? I'll rephrase it. So, why
Sure.
Israel's image was much more positive publicly than it is today, right?
But I also want to know if you think that the early Israel sort of similarly genocidal, like we're seeing maybe more mortality, more mortality, more death, but that this is a continuation of something very similar, or are we looking at something new? You know?
Well, let's start from the
How do you see
beginning.
that?
Okay, so Zionist settlement began at the end of the 19th century. And it didn't have the means or the intention to expel anyone. It used the lands that were largely bought by the Rothschild family in France. They could not really exercise power because they didn't have it. They acquired power around the independence. So starting from 1947, systematic ethnic cleansing began, 1947, and it continued to 49. Until 1966, those Palestinians who stayed within Israel lived under martial law. So that already shows you that there are two kinds of law. That there is martial law and then the civil law for the rest. They received citizenship in 66 and later, but in 67, a few hundred thousand Palestinians more were expelled from the territory that Israel conquered in the Six-Day War. So again, all these facts were available. Why the public image was positive then?
Yeah.
I think that there are several reasons for that. First, I think one important reason after the war in particular was the sympathy for the victims of Nazi genocide, which I think is a mighty factor that favored the establishment of the Zionist state. I think without it, highly unlikely it would have happened. So that was one. So Jews are victims, and they were victims. And a lot of people transferred their sympathy for the Jews to the sympathy for the Zionist state. Even though the ideology that killed the Jews in Europe is very similar to the one that is official in Israel. But again, it takes some understanding, some analysis. But for most people, it was a very positive thing that now Jews have their own state. Another reason it was embraced by the left is that the first Zionist settlers and the first governments in Israel till 1977 identified with socialism. Again, I'm using the word identified with socialism rather than were socialists, because for them socialism was a tool to enhance Zionist settlement. If you settle as a farmer, it's much more difficult to defend yourself than if you are settled in the kibbutz, where you have 100 people. So these socialist settlements, kibbutzim in particular, provoked a lot of interest, a lot of sympathy from the left, and a lot of people that even among Quebecois politicians went to kibbutz as volunteers.
Lucien Robillard.
Yeah, Lucien Robillard. So there are a lot of people who did that because Israel was seen as a sign of rebirth of the Jewish people, that they deserve it, and so on. And Palestinians were largely invisible in this story. When the settlements after 67 continued, then some people discovered Palestinians, so to speak. They were, if someone was sort of remotely aware of the existence of Palestinians, it was because they were refugees. So you have to help refugees, you know. Again, we have to contextualize it that when Palestinians were expelled from the future Israel, 47, 49, millions of people were expelled. Millions of Germans, ethnic Germans, were expelled from Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Romania, and East Prussia, Kaliningrad. So it was not unusual. Again, just like Zionist settlement as a colonial enterprise was not unusual at that time, this was not unusual. It's not justification, it's just explanation why it didn't provoke the protest that it would provoke today, because a lot of people did that. So that positive image also was tremendously enhanced by talented Israeli advocates, both from within Israel and from outside of Israel, who, well, just I mentioned Abba Eben, a South African Jew who was extremely eloquent, very fine speaker, who really helped a lot to polish Israel's image, I think more than perhaps others. There were writers, who wrote, the novel Exodus, it's heroic. So there were very heroic stories about Zionist settlers, about their struggle for independence. And there was a lot of sympathy for these people, particularly after the murder of 6 million Jews. So it's understandable. And also, I think, a latent factor, I would say, that Jews were granted the status of white people, whereas those brownish people were different. But again, it's a very latent and definitely not articulated reason.
Front row.
So my question was mainly about this idea of borderless nation. I'm a bit confused about it. I understand that they intervene in other countries in that sense, but does Israel have any intention of actually expanding its territory beyond the Palestinian territory we see here on the map? Because it had many different opportunities, like in the Golan Heights, Sinai region, and now in southern Lebanon. So I'm wondering if they truly have that goal in mind right now, or do they have other issues that are more pressing than actually expanding their territories?
Well, within the Israeli society and within the Israeli government, and you have to realize that Israel, in that sense, is a democratic country, that what you see in the government is what you see in the population. So Ben Gvir is not an anomaly. He represents a very important population, part of the population. So again, I think that all the wars that Israel has waged were waged because of one simple reason: not to grant equality to Palestinians. And the occupation of South Lebanon is a consequence, because there's Hezbollah, which for some reason defends Palestinians. Iran, for some reason, they defend Palestinians. So the Palestinian question is the core of it. And Israel expands and tries, and also the tremendous efforts to cover images of genocide. The purchase of TikTok by the Ellison family, a very Zionist, wealthy family in the United States. All of this tries to solve the Palestinian question the way they understand it. In other words, to hide the worst parts of treatment of Palestinians. And for Israelis, there is a logic that many historians well before me explained. Anita Shapira, a Zionist, she is a doyen of Israeli historians, not a new historian, very old historian actually. And she wrote, there's a logic to all settlement. Settlement feels insecure, so it expands its borders. And on the new borders, it also feels insecure because they also expelled people who were in the previous part. So they tend to expand because there's a basic insecurity. And insofar as Israeli society is not ready to grant equality to Palestinians under its control, it'll continue. So there are two ways. Either you occupy the land, like in South Lebanon, or, well, Golan Heights is different, just territorial grab. or you rely on the United States to turn governments of certain Arab states or border states, Egypt and Jordan in particular, vassals of Israel, which they are. So either there's a political way or there's a military way. But behind both is the rejection of Palestinian equality.
John.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment about Israeli influence in Africa. Africa's come up several times. I live in South Africa and I work all over the continent. But in South Africa, Israel has always been the bad guy. Israel helped South Africa in the old apartheid days build the bomb. The Americans made South Africa give the bomb back just before the ANC came to power. Lonnie Casrels, who you mentioned, is a wonderful man, and as I'm sure you know, almost every South African Jew hates him.
Not every, many.
But the vast majority. People like Johnny Steinberg and Andrew Feinstein and others. Fine. Anyway, it's not what I wanted to say. In the old days, Israel and South Africa were part of a quartet of pariah nations that also included Chile and Taiwan. Today, Israel buys its influence in Africa. Morocco is probably the latest example. They supply arms to many countries and presidential guards. Israeli forces, IDF, forms the presidential guard in Uganda, in Chad, in Equatorial Guinea, and in Kenya. And Cameroon as well, I should have forgotten. Paul Biya wouldn't be there without the IDF.
The new Swiss Guard.
Sorry?
The new Swiss Guard.
Well, the Swiss are a bit friendlier. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. The influence is enormous.
Okay.
Oh, Uganda. I should have mentioned Uganda as well. Museveni is protected by the
Well, thank you for your comment, because that's exactly what I said. There was an export of know-how. This is export of know-how. You have people who experienced in population control, in security issues, and they're very employable, particularly by governments who don't have much legitimacy, because they have something to fear. So I think that this is the specialty of Israel. It's their marque de commerce, trademark.
Trademark, yeah. Yes.
I do like this concept
Whoops.
of Israel as a borderless entity, the concept that you described here. Is I've heard this idea before, but I did think that it can apply more to the internationally recognized borders of Israel, as someone else mentioned. And I wonder, with Lebanon and Syria also having more pliant leaders at this point in time, where do the internationally recognized borders of Israel stop? Do you think it will just continue to grow? Is the Greater Israel Project the end goal?
I have no idea. I have no idea, because we live in a time of tremendous changes in the world. The United States is unlikely to enhance its power. I'm putting it very mildly. And that will have repercussions elsewhere. So, but Israel is prepared to become a super Sparta, as Netanyahu said, and they're prepared for the diminution and later maybe a withdrawal of American support. And I wrote a few articles 10 years ago about Israel's relations with Russia, China, and India. And they're reasonably good. India buys a lot of Israeli arms. In this book, you'll find Putin in the chapter on supporters of Israel. And the Chinese also have very close links with Israelis. And that may explain, among other things, the remarkably moderate reaction of both China and Russia to what's going on with the war in Iran. So no one can predict how it's going to be, but up to this day, no Israeli government ever defined its borders. They never said, we want these borders, okay, whatever they may be. Of course, within the Israeli coalition, there are people who want to have from the Nile to the Euphrates. Okay, but this is a minority view, I would say, so far. Otherwise, it's very difficult to tell where it will end. I have no way of saying it.
Thank you. Perhaps one or two more questions and we'll wrap it up. Yes?
Before you mentioned some people who aren't, you mentioned people who aren't Jewish, who proudly name themselves Zionists, and you mentioned that in the past support was more towards sympathy towards the Jewish people, but now that the Palestinian genocide is really hard for the world to ignore, what would you say motivates non-Jewish people today to support Zionism?
Well, there are religious reasons that I mentioned, because the origins of Zionism are Protestant, and so all these millions of Christian Zionists who are not only in the United States, they're also in Brazil, in South Korea, in Nigeria, many places, Guatemala. These are very devoted people. For them, it's a religious issue. I mean, they believe in it. There are those, particularly in Germany, who think that by helping Israel, they are atoning for the crimes of their ancestors. Even though at that time it was possible, when Israel turned 60, I published a long article in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung in which I explained that the ideology of Israel is very similar to the ideology that was espoused by the Nazis, ethnic nationalism, supremacy, and all that. At that time, it was possible to publish it in Germany. Today, I think I would be imprisoned for that, or definitely. Actually, the only country, no, the book, one of the books that someone mentioned, A Threat from Within, in French, it's Au nom de la Torah. It appeared in 15 languages. I'm not boasting, but there's one language in which this book is available, only print on demand, how it's called, print on demand. In other words, you won't find it in bookstores, because in Germany, it's difficult. And, even the formulation, Jewish opposition to Zionism, makes people cringe. Germany is a very hard nut to crack. I'm trying. I recently published a long interview in Berliner Zeitung, so I'm trying, because I think it's a tremendously important pole of support for Israel, military support, weapons, and so on. So this is one. And, of course, Israel is often associated with the West. And therefore, people who are defending Western civilization against barbarians, as they consider, they sympathize with Israel. So the more to the right you go in the political spectrum, in Europe in particular, the more pro-Israel there will be. By and large, for example, Orban is fervently pro-Israel. In the United States, it's a little bit cracking now, but in Europe so far it's pretty solid. And of course there is a good old racism there, that they support white people versus not quite white. And again, this terminology has nothing to do with the color. It's a political terminology. And I think that's also a hidden reason for support for Israel.
Well, yes, there's one question here, Dr. Kadir.
Well, just to maybe bring it back to the hot news.
Tu peux poser la question en français.
Pour recentrer sur l'actualité brûlante de la confrontation des États-Unis et d'Israël contre l'Iran et l'attaque un peu inattendue des forces iraniennes en fait, sur Israël. On sait qu'il y a un contrôle d'information très très serré. Il y a, je crois, 5 ans d'emprisonnement sur le coup si quelqu'un filme les frappes iraniennes sur la Tel Aviv dans les villes. Comment voyez-vous la suite de ce projet sioniste? Est-ce que, par exemple, le fait qu'ils sont présents ailleurs dans le monde, en Afrique, est-ce que déjà il y a cette conversation dans les milieux sionistes qu'on veut changer de lieu, ça devient trop chaud dans cette région-là, ou non? Comment pensez-vous aussi que la population va réagir, puisqu'ils se pensaient en sécurité sous le dôme de fer, mais finalement ils se rendent compte que c'est un passoire de fer?
Bon, j'ai beaucoup de difficultés. You translate the question.
Very, very well. So the question is today's reality. How does Professor Rabkin see it with Iran? There's a law, if I understood correctly, there's a law in Israel. If you take pictures or film the destruction of Israel, you're going to spend 5 years in prison. So there's like a blackout, an information blackout, and basically, what's Professor Rabkin's take on what's going on right now? That's in a nutshell. Is that correct? Okay.
Well, I think the question also, what will happen? Of course, I don't know what will happen. I don't know how many missiles Iranians have. I have no data. And that's a very mighty factor in this whole situation. That within Israeli society, there was already a lot of disenchantment. Starting, I would say, even before October, because Israeli population today is very much united behind the war. But as soon as peace comes, it becomes very fragmented. And one part of the population, the most productive and educated secular part of Israeli society, doesn't support the government, doesn't support the right-wing trend within Israel, judicial reform and all stuff like that. So there has been significant emigration from Israel. And since many of those educated urban Israelis have second citizenship because of their grandparents in Poland or whatever, it's relatively easy for them to relocate. So there is this trend. On the other hand, there is an inverse trend. The most Zionists, the fervent Zionists from the United States, immigrate to Israel. So there is a natural selection operating. Today, the concentration of Israelis, the highest concentration of Israelis in Europe is, of all places, Berlin. So Israelis there are largely left-wing, progressive, they fled from all this. I don't know how this war is going to end. As you know, it depends very much on what's happening in the United States. But I think Israel today is playing all its cards. It has absolutely not that it had scruples before, but it doesn't even have rhetorical scruples. In a way, it's easy for all of us to understand what's going on in spite of the blackout. Actually, the blackout is a continuation of the blackout in Gaza, because till today, no foreign journalists are allowed in Gaza. So much for freedom of the press. So Israel is trying to control the image to the extent it can, buying TikTok, and Netanyahu called it Eighth Front. They are fighting 7 different countries, and Eighth Front is the TikTok and the social media and so on. So I definitely don't have a crystal ball to tell you how it's going to end. But Israel is also likely to undergo a lot of changes because of the changes happening in the world. And so, but I don't see imminent collapse of Zionism that, say, Ilan Pappé sees, but I may be wrong.
Well, you perhaps do not have a crystal ball, but I do, and I can say that this evening it made my decade. So thank you very much, Professor Rabkin.